This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this Best of Bob Lowry, I covered 3 subjects with him. The first is, what would you do, or what would he do, actually, if he gets to a pool and they just had a big pool party? The other question I asked him is the adjusted alkalinity. Let's say that your cyanuric acid is over 200. How would you calculate the adjusted alkalinity in that case? And also, when you have a pool with really low pH, how do you adjust that up without overloading it with soda ash is one of the things that I asked him as well. And I think you'll get a lot of great information out of this podcast. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. From me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. Let's say the softball team calls you and 15 players are coming over to go swimming. What is the first thing you would do?
Well, I would probably suggest that you raise the chlorine level up, probably by whatever's in there now. I would probably add 4 or 5 parts per million more of chlorine. I would perhaps add a non-chlorine oxidizer like monopersulfate. And just add whatever they suggest as a shock, because you can go in the water with the recommended oxidizer amount. You can go in the water right away. So raise the chlorine level, add the non-chlorine shock. The biggest thing that you could do is see if you could get them to rinse off before they get in the pool. And the reason is that in fact, you can save money at any pool if you can get the bathers or people that are getting in the pool, if you can get them to rinse off before they get in. Because the biggest consumption of chlorine is from people. And, well, not exactly, but over a week's period, the biggest loss of chlorine is to sunlight, because you lose about a part per million per day of chlorine to sunlight. But when people get in the pool, it disappears pretty quick. So in a busy pool, the biggest use of chlorine is from people. The stuff that's in our bodies, on our bodies, comes off as soon as we get into the pool. So the biggest use of chlorine is like the first 15 minutes you're in the water. After that, there's not much new contamination getting in there. The initial insult of you getting into the pool is where everything uses up the chlorine. You've got on sunblock, deodorant, maybe some hairspray, some lip balm, foot powder, you got gels and creams and stuff like that. And all of that stuff is on your body and it's not in your body. And as soon as you get in the water, most of it comes off. And so chlorine, it needs to be oxidized. And either chlorine has to do it or non-chlorine shock has to do it. So if you can get people to rinse before they get in, you can save big money on chlorine and oxidizer. And they did a study in England right around 2000. It proved that they could save 60% of the chemicals by people simply rinsing off before they get in. And it became so huge, the report became so well known that they actually made it a rule. When you get in a public pool in England, you have to rinse off before you get in. And so it's a rule. Anyway, between those three things, you can manage it. Raise the chlorine level, add a non-chlorine shock, and ask the guys to rinse off before they get in. And it won't be a difficult problem then. If you do nothing, you're going to play catch up. And once the chlorine starts forming chloramines with all of those things that are on all those soccer guys, then it takes even more chlorine to get rid of it. It's a big savings if you can get them to rinse and have some chlorine in the water when they get in, and it'll oxidize that stuff right away.
And if they're looking for non-chlorine shock, Leslie's Pool Supplies carries it. And then your main suppliers carry it. I think the main brand that Pool Corp supplies is called Shocktrine. So that's the non-chlorine shock if anyone's looking for that for their pool route or for their pool. Like you said, that's a great way to kind of hedge that. And I guess the second part of that question is a lot of pool owners like to turn their pool off while people are using it for a lot of reasons. Maybe their automatic cleaner is working in there, or they have a water feature that's making noise, or just the equipment by the pool is making a lot of noise. You don't advise that if you have that many people in the pool, right? You want that filter running.
No, you need that filter going. Mm-hmm. You need the filter going. And the great thing is that the chlorine that's in the water then doesn't have to work on the stuff that's in the water because it's trapped in the filter. So the chlorine that's in the pool is free to kill the stuff that's in the pool. So it's really important that you keep that pump and filter on for a long time. And particularly after a big bather load gets out of your pool, you need to leave the filter on for at least
And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description.
Turnover.
Another question here that I get often, and this happens a lot, where the cyanuric acid is 200, they're testing it, they do dilution tests, and it comes in about 200, but the alkalinity is at 70 or 80. So how would you do an adjusted alkalinity on a pool with such a high cyanuric acid reading and such a low alkalinity reading? Because I think those go hand in hand. When you use a lot of tablets, the alkalinity stays pretty low.
Yeah, well, it stays low because the tablets actually have a pH of about 2.8. So when they're added to the water, even though they're dissolving slowly, you're still adding that acid. And that acid will take away the pH and the alkalinity. But then with aeration and all the other things going on in the pool, the pH may go up, but the alkalinity go down. So you can have a problem with that. Or if you're using a lot of trichlor, then the pH and alkalinity both go down. You get cyanuric acid buildup. And the buildup is that for each 10 parts per million of chlorine that are added to the water by trichlor, you get 6 parts per million of cyanuric acid. And that can be in a pool if the main source of chlorine is trichlor. Then the use of chlorine in a pool is about 1 part per million per day from sunlight and just regular degradation. Then if you add bathers to that a couple of times a week, you're looking at about 10 parts per million per week of chlorine use. If it's all coming from trichlor, that means your cyanuric acid's going up by 6 parts per million per week or 25 parts per million per month. And that is big because we say that you need a chlorine residual that's in the pool that's equal to a percentage of the cyanuric acid. And if you're not using borate in your pool, then the cyanuric acid, the free chlorine level should be 7.5% of cyanuric acid. If the cyanuric acid level is going up by 25 parts per million per month, that means that next month you need 1.5 parts per million of chlorine more residual in the pool than you use this month. And the next month, 1.5 parts per million, more of that. And so each month, you have to keep increasing the chlorine level by 1.5 parts per million. If you don't do that, then you can have algae start to grow. And then you got to shock and add algicide and all kinds of stuff trying to get rid of the algae. So if you keep the chlorine level up, you won't have the algae. But the higher the cyanuric acid level, the higher the free chlorine residual needs to be. And so it's better to reduce the cyanuric acid level and then use a percentage of it as a residual. And the problem with a cyanuric acid level that's very high is that when we calculate the saturation index, which is an indication of whether the water in the pool is corrosive or scale forming, when we check the saturation index, we may find that with the adjustment for cyanuric acid, that the water is actually corrosive when we didn't think it was. And the adjustment is that about 1/3 of the cyanuric acid reading needs to be subtracted from the apparent total alkalinity reading. Mm-hmm. And so you get an adjusted alkalinity reading. And the adjusted alkalinity reading is actually called carbonate alkalinity instead of total alkalinity. It's called carbonate alkalinity, and we use carbonate alkalinity in the calculation of the saturation index. You can see if you actually had a cyanuric acid level of 200, if you take 1/3 of 200, you're looking at, what is that, 68 or 67? Mm-hmm. You're taking 67 away from whatever your total alkalinity reading is. And if you got 70 alkalinity, you basically have 0 carbonate alkalinity in the pool. And that's got to mean that you have corrosive water.
Mm-hmm. And that would cause staining in the plaster in a lot of cases. I've seen that staining
can cause corrosion of the plaster, and it can cause corrosion of the metal components in the equipment, which then, when the metal builds up in the pool, it surpasses the saturation point, and then you get a stain.
And I wonder, Bob, if some people were saying that cyanuric acid is damaging to the plaster, but it's not the cyanuric acid itself. It's probably the fact that the alkalinity is so low. Or the carbonate alkalinity.
Right. You end up with corrosive water. You get the water into a corrosive situation, and you don't think you are, because you may be keeping the alkalinity at say 100, which, if you look at the guidelines from PHTA, it says it should be between 80 and 100. So if you look at, 80 and 120. So if you 100's right in the middle. So if you look at it and say 100's great, but if you had total alkalinity, cyanuric acid of 200, and you subtract 67 from 100, now your carbonate alkalinity is only 33. You're looking at a carbonate alkalinity of 33, and that's not good. And you don't even need the saturation index to figure that out. Nobody would tell you that an alkalinity of 30 is okay. And the problem is, if you raise your alkalinity to compensate for high cyanuric acid, then the pH keeps going up because high alkalinity pulls the pH up. So if you run your pool at, say, 140 of alkalinity, it's going to keep pulling the pH up all the time. And you're going to have to deal with a high pH. And if you try to lower the pH with acid, it lowers alkalinity. So it's just a game of chasing it around. So you're a lot better off, obviously, to drain the pool to get the cyanuric acid level down to 50 or 60 parts per million so you can deal with this.
Now, here's another one that happens. This is mainly for those large vinyl pools back on the East Coast. What if your pH is 5 and you have a 25,000 gallon pool, and to get it to 7.8, it calls for adding 100 pounds of soda ash to the pool. Now, how would you add 100 pounds of soda ash to a pool? Wouldn't that overload the whole filtration system and cause it to drop out and go all over the pool?
It can, if you added it all at once, it probably would. Although I suspect that perhaps 100 pounds might be a little bit more than you would need. But once you build the pH up just a little bit using soda ash, then you can do it the rest of the way with baking soda, and then increase the pH by aeration and turbulence. And that way you don't have to add so many pounds of chemicals to the pool. So it's a much better way to do it. Oftentimes when you're trying to adjust pH and alkalinity using soda ash, if you add enough soda ash to get the right alkalinity, then your pH is way too high. And if you add enough to get the pH up there, then your alkalinity is probably not high enough. So you need probably a combination of soda ash and bicarb to get to the right level. And you can save some money if you simply get the alkalinity where it needs to be and then raise pH with aeration and turbulence. And it raises really quickly when the pH is low. So you can do this. It's not difficult.
Okay, so you wouldn't put 100 pounds of soda ash in the pool. You would put enough of it in there just to get it up a little bit, and then you would go to baking soda to get the alkalinity to, let's say, 80 or 90. And then from there, you would put maybe a submersible pump shooting water or return jets shooting water up at the surface, and that would raise the pH more than just adding all that product.
Yes, and I have a rule of thumb that I used to do, and it's just based on practical knowledge and years of doing it. When I have to add a really large amount of chemical to any pool, except for chlorine, I usually add it in thirds. And so if you need 100 pounds in the pool, I would add 30 pounds or 30 to 40 pounds. So that doesn't have to be exact, just 30 to 40 pounds. Give it a couple of hours to get for the chemical reactions to take place, then add another 30. And it's also a good idea between additions to retest the water. And the reason is that if you were wrong in your calculation, then you don't have to add a bunch of acid to get things back to where they belong. Or, maybe you thought you had a 25,000 gallon pool and it's only a 15,000 gallon pool. So it's a good idea to just kind of be a little bit cautious instead of throwing that all in there. Other obvious reason that you mentioned is if you put 100 pounds in there, chances are if you have any amount of calcium in the water, you're probably going to precipitate some of it. Because when you put 100 pounds of soda ash in the pool, you're going to raise the pH of the whole pool up to perhaps 9. And at 9, you can start to precipitate out some calcium carbonate, even if the calcium level is only 150 or 200. I would add it in thirds. And also if it precipitates, it's a very fine precipitate, and it can take a couple of days to clear. And you don't want to do that, So just put a third in there, retest it, make sure that everything's okay.
If you're looking for more episodes, you can find those by going to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, clicking on the podcast icon, where I have over 1,700 podcasts for you to listen to. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel Monday through Friday, where I post an episode there each week, each day during the week. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.